It's day 807. It's also July 21st, 2021. Just 20 miles later. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name's Craig, and this is my story. A story about life. Life out there. For visuals while listening, to watch the video versions of this podcast, or even just to say hey, check us out on our website at lifeoutthere.me. We left Saratoga Springs convinced that the worst was behind us. The quick trek to Salt Lake was short. One last stretch before we could relax, explore, learn. And first, it was working. We felt like we'd settled back into our groove, Billie and I. Before leaving Saratoga Springs, I'd spent some time online looking for an RV park in Salt Lake City. Still odd to me how few RV parks there are in this area. But Salt Lake at least had a few. I'd made some calls, but I wasn't getting any answers. It's weird how this pandemic continues to pop up and get in the way of normal life out here in the world. Offices don't answer phones during a pandemic, I guess. But one thing I had found that was intriguing is that the Utah State Fair Park, home to the Utah State Fair, was located right in the city. Their website didn't mention any RV parking opportunity, but I thought it was worth a quick look. We'd had good experiences across the country in RV sites on fairgrounds. If there wasn't anything there, we'd head a few blocks over to the Salt Lake City KOA. The engine stayed cool. The gauges behaved. But as we neared the fairgrounds, I noticed a slight uptick in the engine temps. Nothing dramatic, but after what we'd been through, it was just enough to make me question things. I pulled onto the Utah State Fair Park for a look around. Found myself a spot on the back of this massive front area parking. I figured let the engine cool down a little and check the coolant levels again. But I didn't even have to check the radiator when I spotted it. Another leak. It was just a drip, but that meant I had to find an RV spot quick. I had to have space and time to fix another leak. Once the engine had cooled, I popped off the radiator cap and was topping off the coolant when this big black GMC Denali rolls up next to us. Nearly slides to a stop. The guy in the driver's seat with his window down just pointed and ordered us off the property. No RV parking allowed here. He almost shouted it. I was a bit taken aback by how confrontational he was. I tried to ask about nearby RV parking opportunities, but he was not interested in questions and clearly wasn't interested in helping. It appeared his only interest was enforcing. But enforcing what? It was weird. I was on a public parking lot at the state fairgrounds. Front entrance wide open. No signage to indicate that I'd done anything wrong, and yet some guy was clearly on the attack. I mean, no uniform, but he was nearing hostile. Why? I wondered. No introduction. I had no idea what he considered his authority to be to order me off of a public parking lot at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And yet, here we were. He cranked the steering wheel, stepped on the gas, and left just as abruptly as he had arrived. So I left too. I turned right out of the fairgrounds, right again at the next light. I was driving up North 1200 West. Salt Lake City has street names nothing like anything I'd ever seen. But I was pulling up driving instructions to the KOA as I drove and realized that I was going the wrong direction. I needed to pull up to the next stoplight, get turned around, and headed back towards Temple Street. But sitting at the stoplight, waiting for it to turn green, Vasilando's engine started sounding, just wrong. Not just overheating type wrong, something deeper. It was uneven. It was labored, like it was choking on itself. I eased onto the gas when the light turned green, planning to pull over. But then, bam! A sharp pop, a sudden cloud of smoke out of the exhaust. And the sound under the doghouse, well, that changed completely. It wasn't knocking, it wasn't sputtering. It sounded like loose metal being thrown around at random. Like the inside of the engine had turned into a box of broken parts. I coasted to the side of the road and stopped behind another RV. We were parked along what looked like a city park. I sat for a moment, contemplating what had just happened and what that meant. But that guy, back there on the parking lot, he'd gotten under my skin. I think I was still shaking a bit. Maybe I was just mad. As I looked around the park, I think I started to make sense of his attitude. I, of course, didn't understand the complete magnitude of it all just yet, but I did notice there were several RVs parked all around the park, even in its parking lots. And I noticed that they were all pretty old, pretty raggedy, rough looking. And I started to make correlations between them and us. Here I was, in a nearly 40-year-old RV. Granted, clearly in better shape than most of those around us, but nonetheless, a 40-year-old RV. That guy had made assumptions. Who I was, what my objectives were. He wasn't interested in asking any questions because he had already decided. It took me a while, I think, to understand why that interaction stuck with me like that. It wasn't what he said, it was how quickly he had decided who I was. No questions, no curiosity, no pause. Just assessment. Vehicle, age, condition, and a conclusion drawn without a single fact. I don't know, maybe humans do this all the time. Scan, categorize. Protect our version of order by deciding who belongs and who doesn't. And on that morning, in that parking lot, I didn't represent a traveler or a question or even a person. I represented a problem, an old RV, a potential stay, a disruption. And I couldn't help thinking how different that moment might have been if I'd been driving something newer, bigger, cleaner, something that signaled temporary instead of uncertain. I guess because maybe the truth is, most of us aren't treated based on who we are. We're treated based on what we appear to threaten. And I didn't realize it yet. But that moment was the first sign that Salt Lake City wasn't just where Vasilando's engine stopped. It was also where I was about to learn how invisible, how exposed you can become, all at the same time. And before I knew it, I'd contemplated that guy and his attitude for nearly 20 minutes. I knew I had a problem, but I also needed a few minutes. I needed some fresh air. A quick search on my phone told me that there was a Maverick convenience store just 2 blocks up on the left. So I locked Billy up safely in the RV. I set the alarm so I'd be notified on my phone in case of any funny business, and I set out for a quick walk. No electric bike, just some air, a walk. The truth is, I needed a beer. I know, it's barely noon on a Saturday, but I needed a beer. Some time to breathe, to think. Returning to Vasilando and Billy a few minutes later, I'd notice the trees. A mature park for sure. People walking dogs. Kids playing. Normal life continuing, while our home had apparently just died quietly at the curb. I knew that this time I didn't even need to try. Vasilando's engine, well, it wouldn't even try. Just a final mechanical truth. Vasilando wasn't limping. He was done. But even still, at that moment, I still thought this was just another road problem. Another story I'd tell later and laugh about. I didn't yet understand that this wasn't a breakdown. It was a stop. And Salt Lake City? That was where we were going to learn exactly how long a stop can last. This thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously. You can.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.